Huh, there's something you don't see every day. Hi guys, this is Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland for the Game Boy Advance. Now, about a year ago, I did my first playthrough on this game, however it was shit, so let's never speak of it again. Now, Nightmare in Dreamland is a remake of the second Kirby game, which was Kirby's Adventure, which was also the only Kirby game released for the NES. Now, given this was actually my first Kirby game, I'm actually more used to this than I am Kirby's Adventure. However, there's not a huge difference between the level designs. The differences are mainly just the graphical updates, the addition of multiplayer, and the fact that this game is apparently easier. I can't quite confirm that. I do have a harder time playing Kirby's Adventure, but that's probably just because I'm not as used to it rather than it being all that much more difficult, but regardless, there are some other changes, but we'll be getting into those later. For now, let's just get this started. Also, why isn't Bindle Kirby an actual ability? Alright, so, nothing too interesting on the menu here. There are the sub-games, but all those that we have right now are actually located in the game itself, so we don't have to worry about those. So, let's begin! Alright, so, first off, the controls. You can double tap left or right to dash instead of walk. You can press up or A repeatedly to float. You can do this as much as you want. You can also inhale by holding down the B button, which is probably Kirby's most important ability. For instance, if you suck up an enemy, you can press B again to shoot them out and thus weaponize them. However, you can also press down with certain enemies and you'll gain a copy ability. Now, only certain enemies have certain copy abilities, such as that Waddle Doo back there. This one gave us Beam, which is a fairly useful ability, but we won't really be using it all that much right now because I'm going to use Spark. Now, this is the first of 3 barrier abilities, which... this is actually my least favorite of the 3, but it's probably the one that's really survived the most in the Kirby series, so go figure. But anyway, basically how this works is you hold down B and you stop immediately, however, you are protected on all sides, so it's fairly useful, but I'm gonna ditch it in favor of this ability up here. Now, some might say this is a little more useless since you're not completely protected, but you still stop completely when you use it. However, I think it's a little more powerful than Spark. It goes out a little farther, and it's also useful for some puzzles, so I like it a bit more than Spark, actually. And over there we actually have a body of water. If we dive in here, we actually temporarily lose our ability. Most abilities don't actually work underwater, it'll just be replaced by you spitting water out, but there are a few that don't apply, but we'll get into that later. Now, this door with a big star over it is the goal door. Go into one of these and you end the stage with one of these mini-games. If you get all the way to the top, you get an extra life. All other levels except for the very bottom one will give you points, which are fairly useless. Alright. Over here we have the first of the mini-games. Now, most of the mini-games were changed for this version of the game. Bomb Rally wasn't in Kirby's Adventure. This is actually a pretty easy game. You just have to press A to hit this bomb to the other Kirbys. It's probably the dumbest extreme sport idea I've ever heard, but then again, let's be honest, it's for Kirbys. What are they going to think of? Nothing intelligent, that's for sure. In addition, you can also change the direction you hit the bomb by pressing the A button before you actually hit it. However, you have to press it every time you want to hit it in a counterclockwise motion, so it's not the most useful thing. Also, if you press too early, you die, you make Kirby sad, and you only get a pity 1-up. Yeah, the better you do, the more 1-ups you get. If you don't do well at all, and all the other 3 Kirbys live, well, you get nothing. And at that point, Kirby's just morbidly depressed. Anyway, here we have Gordo. Gordo is completely invincible, so don't bother attacking him. If possible, just let him gently float off into space. Trust me, it's better that way. Ah yes, and over here we have Cutter. I think people like this ability, but I'm honestly not a fan of it. The hitbox is a little small for me, and I just find it too hard to hit enemies with it, but we'll keep it for now. Now these warp star segments are pretty much exist just to transition you to a different setting, but that always confused me as a kid because I was like, wait, how do I play that other section? Now this guy over here is a Poppy Bros Senior. There are smaller versions of these enemies, but in this game they don't give you abilities. This guy does, however. And not only that, he gives you the ability to cause the apocalypse! Which only affected 3 enemies. Now, honestly, I don't really find Crash terribly useful because, well, you can only use it once, and it's Kirby. How many times are you really going to need all the enemies on screen to die? So, really, it's not very useful, but it does have a cool animation, though. There is that. Actually, that animation did change between versions of this game, just gonna point that out. That's Maximum Health Tomato. You can use it to completely heal, but I don't need it, so there's that. Ah, and we're actually almost at the end of the stage, but I know a certain thing we can get here. Up here we actually have an enemy with the Sword ability. Now, Sword ability is one of my favorite abilities in the series. Of course, since this is a remake of the first Kirby game in which power-ups were actually, or copy abilities were actually present, Sword can only use that basic slash and jump slash, so it's got nowhere near as many moves as it does in later games, but it's still fairly useful, and I like it. Alright, I believe this level, I don't really remember much about this level other than the fact that you can just send these Shotzos all the way into a pit, and I guess that introduces the fact that things can fall. There is gravity in the Kirby universe. They didn't neglect that. Oh! I actually forgot this was here. This is Burning, also called Fireball in Kirby's Adventure, I believe. Now, it's a fairly useful ability. Ignore the fact that that just happened, because Kirby will actually dash forward when you use it. It barrels through enemies, and it's got great invincibility frames, so it is a very useful ability, and it's probably one of my favorites in the game. Of course, down here we have some water, and like fire, it's completely useless underwater, which, you know, makes sense. But, by the way, notice I got hit back there and actually lost my ability. Basically, if you ever get hit, you'll lose the ability and you'll have to suck it back up. However, if you lose it underwater, it'll actually dissipate a lot faster than it normally would, and because you can't actually suck things back up, you'd have to be at the surface to actually get it back, so if you lose your ability underwater, well, it's more than likely you're gonna have to say goodbye to it. Alright, ooh, Kirby Museum. So, up here we actually have the ability to pretty much just get an ability anytime we want, and of course it's free, because, you know, there's no currency in this game, why would it cost you anything? And they give me one of my favorite abilities right off the bat, so that's useful. Alright, so, I know what this stage is. We're gonna start off with a mini-boss. Actually, in this version of the game, we can get him. He can actually come down earlier, and if you want to, you can kill him from down here, but it's actually just easier to do that. Now, here we actually have the second barrier ability in the game, which is Freeze, and as you can see, I like this one a lot more than I do Spark, because it does that. That is great, because not only do you get the benefits of Spark's little barrier thing, but you also get to freeze enemies, which is cool. Sorry for the pun. I don't normally apologize for puns, but that one was just bad. But hey, we actually have the third ability right here, the third barrier ability. Just as soon as everything clears, we can get it. This is Needle. Not as good as Freeze because you can't send enemies, you know, into ice cubes and then send them packing towards other enemies, but it is fairly useful, looks cool, and actually got buffed from Kirby's Adventure. In the original game, the spikes didn't actually have as much of a range, and they actually retracted. But unlike in that game, they actually can stay out as long as you want here. But anyway, that candy makes Kirby invincible. Yes, completely invincible. Now all the enemies must bow down before King Kirby, and they'll only have to face a fate worse than death. You plebs. Well, anyway, that was fun. But now that we're done barreling through enemies, we've just about finished this world. Except, of course, for the boss. So, up here we have the okay, you know what, I can't even complete that sentence. It's Wispy Woods. This guy is a recurring first boss, and he is Cake. Actually, you know what? No, Cake is more complicated than Wispy Woods is. Oh, okay, on one hand, Wispy Woods is weak, but, I'll admit I did cheap him out just a little bit there, because, Needle can stay out indefinitely, so, you know what, I'm actually going to give Wispy Woods a second chance. Alright, so, I'm going to give him one more shot to get a few attacks off before I kill him. So, we got Sword this time. Oh man, and look at those invincibility frames. He's not going to... Okay, I'll admit, I cheaped you out the first time, but come on, you should have been at least able to do one attack, Wispy. Alright, I'll give you one more chance, Wispy. One. Okay, now I have no ability, so he cannot possibly die before he gets an attack off. So, Wispy Woods only has 2 attacks. He can fling apples at you. And apparently I just got spanked by an apple. That was kind of lame. And he can also just spit out some air. That's it. The gigantic living tree can only fire some apples at you, which you use to hit him. And he can blow air at you. Come on, Wispy Woods, sure I'd be dead on extra mode and that would be rather sad, but still, that was way too easy. Ah well, now that we've made a gigantic tree cry, there's only one logical thing to do. Dance and rub it in! Oh yeah, take that, you stupid tree! I just punted you with an apple in your stupid dumb tree face! Oh yeah!